What's up guys, Jason here. This is part one of a three-part series of a recording of an interview that I did with Dr. Heather this last week in one of her Facebook groups. In this video I talk about 3 tips that you can use in your own running life to help you prevent injuries. The interview itself is pretty lengthy, but I broke it down into 3 parts. So each video will be less than 10 minutes. So be sure to watch all the way to the end because there is tons of great information. But the best part, learn more about my running backstory, where I came from, how I got into running all those years ago, what I've done during my running career, and lessons I've learned along the way. Most importantly, smash that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned for all 3 parts of this series. I decided, okay, I need to keep it simple. I need to keep things simple. So I thought, well, what are the most important things that I can share with people, with runners, when it comes to form and technique and injury preventions? Well, then I got thinking and I thought, let's make it even more simple. What would runners like you want to hear so they can run healthy? So that's when I decided to piece this together. And I decided the best way to help your running story is to share kind of my running story. Because I'm a firm believer that my story can become your story. And within my running story are several gems that can help you become an even better runner and run healthy. So what I'm going to do tonight is share a few different gems and kind of wrap in everything that Dr. Heather has shared, and we're going to put a nice big bow on it, and you guys will be ready to run that next PR. Okay? All right. So a little bit more about me. So like I said, I've been running for almost 19 years. When I was in middle school, I had a PE coach that would have us run a mile every Monday, and we called that Mile Monday. And we were supposed to record our times as the year went on, and that was a lot of fun. At first I thought, dang, this a whole mile? Like, that's far. I can't run a mile. But being kind of the competitive guy that I am, I realized, I was beating most of the other kids in my class and probably impressing a few girls in the class too. And so I was pretty motivated to keep getting better. So that really got me going. I wanted to keep getting faster. Each week I'd try a little bit harder and push a little bit more. So by the time I was in 7th or 8th grade, I was around about a 6:36 mile or 6:36 for the mile. And around that same time, I ran my very first 5K. Now, up to this point, I had only ever run in 1 or 2 mile races, nothing more. I wasn't training for anything. I thought, oh, a 5K, I can do a 5K. Well, my very first 5K was March 2003, and it kicked my butt. I learned the very hard way that you need to train and you need to be prepared to go to races. So fast forward a little bit, later that year, my PE coach had us all on the blacktop out in that hot Florida sun. And he asked if any of us were going to the high school in the area, Lake Region High School, if anyone was interested in cross country. Now, I was a pretty shy kid. And so I didn't really raise my hand too quickly. But I just talked to one of my friends who shot his hand up and said, well, Jason Thompson in the back, he'll run cross country. I kind of looked around. Everyone looked at me. In the movies, when everyone just kind of turns and looks at you, that's kind of what it felt like. So after class, my coach gave me this huge packet of papers with all kinds of information, a calendar that had different distances to run, and a bunch of other stuff with it, and talked about when summer practices would begin. So later, once school ended, after 8th grade, had that summer off before freshman year, and I'll never, ever, ever forget my very first cross-country practice that summer. So my dad drove me to where we were supposed to meet, and I could see all these big kids around. Now, when I was a freshman, I was pretty small. I mean, I'm 6'1" now, so I'm not huge, but I was much smaller my freshman year. And so I saw all these big kids, and I'd only ever heard and imagined what high school would be like, and I was pretty sure I was the smallest one out there. So we parked. My dad got out with me, and we walked up, and my coach, Coach Kaufman, saw me. He could tell I was the new kid. I don't know if it was the deer in the headlights or what, but he walked up and introduced himself. And after a few minutes, he says, okay, we're all stretched. It's time to go start running. And everyone knew how far they needed to run except for myself and one of the other freshmen there. And he said, okay, well, I'll run with you guys. We're going to run 2 miles today. And I remember thinking, 2 miles? What? This is the first day of practice. How are we going to run 2 miles? But I wasn't going to say no to coach, so we ran those 2 miles. And we got better, and as the summer went on, we gradually increased our mileage, and I became more and more comfortable the faster we got. So later on during that summer, I started developing some really bad heel pains in both of my heels. Every single run, it would feel like my heels were on fire, like just pins and needles, and it wasn't a very pleasant experience. It got to the point where I had to just kind of walk and shake it out, and I felt really embarrassed because I'm supposed to be running so well, but my feet hurt. And if you've had pain like that, be sure to leave a comment below, because I think a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm the only one experiencing that. I'm sure all of us have experienced something like that before. Now, if you were to record what I looked like when I was running at this time, I probably looked like a T-Rex with my arms up really high. Probably had my heels way out in front of me, and probably just looked pretty goofy out there. I was also running in pretty, we'll say pretty janky Nike shoes. They were the Nike Impacts. So for those of you that don't know, way back when Nike made the Nike Shocks, and the Impacts was kind of the knockoff or the step down from that. And I had these shoes for months, probably since the previous school year started. So my very first tip, my very first gem that I want to share with you guys to make sure you're running healthy is to make sure you have decent shoes. So just like you go to a doctor, I strongly recommend that you should go to the doctor regularly. But go to a doctor regularly and get a checkup. With your shoes, it's the same way. Regularly check up on your shoes. How's the tread on the bottom? Are there any tears in the upper of the shoe? What does the wear pattern look like? So, for example, here is one of my pairs of shoes. So I run mainly in Adidas. I have really narrow feet, and Adidas seems to sit pretty well with me. But I've had these shoes for quite a while. Actually, I've had these shoes for almost 800 or 900 miles. Now, I know you may be thinking, what on earth are you running in shoes for that many miles? Well, Adidas has a little special midsole that's a little different than most, and they tend to last a little bit longer. But if I were to do a checkup of my shoe, you notice I'm starting to wear down right on the medial part of my forefoot, right up front. So I've always been a bit of a pronator, not extensively, but a bit. And over time, that's kind of been my wear pattern, where I've just kind of rubbed off that part right there. So let's talk about how to pick a good running shoe. I know Dr. Heather talked a little bit about this too. So I used to work at a running specialty store out in the beautiful Wasatch Mountains in Utah. It was actually the same store where Ultra Running was created. So if you're familiar with Ultra kind of piloted the whole zero drop shoe maybe probably 7-8 years ago, back when things were starting to go more minimal. Ultra came to be. So when I worked at that running store, we sold a ton of shoes. Out west, running is a big deal, quite a big deal out there. And I worked at this store for a couple of years. I ended up becoming one of the number one salesmen there, which is kind of cool. And one of the things that I encouraged people to do when they were just trying to decide a shoe is this. So when people would walk in and say, okay, I need this shoe. My friend runs in, blah, 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 but I don't know what I want. Perfect. Those were my favorite. So what we would do is we'd go outside and we'd do a very simple and basic gait analysis. We'd use an iPad, and you could use your own camera. You could download an app that has like a gait analysis feature, but it was very, 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 very simple, and anyone could do this. You guys could do this too. So what we would do is a few different views. So what I would start with is I'd have the person put on some shoes, some good neutral shoes that they're familiar with. So something that they've run in before or something comparable to that. And we'd go out and find a straight line, and they would just jog back and forth a few times. And I would be behind them, holding up the iPad just like this, and we'd record them. And I'd watch what their feet do, watch how they land, watch how they go into the loading phase and push off. I'd watch how their arm swing was, what their head was doing, if there was any hip torsion, any hip rotation, and we'd kind of watch that view. After we do that, we'd go from the side view, so I could watch them run in front of me. That way we can get a good grasp on what's going on, whether they're prominently striking on their heel, or whether they're on their toes or on their midfoot. We get a really good grasp of what's going on. So you guys can do that too. So you either set your camera up yourself on like a curb, or if you have a little tripod or whatever, or if you have someone that could do it for you, go outside and try this. I don't think people, this is just my opinion, but I don't think people watch how they run enough. So I know when I have people record me when I'm running at like a race, I always get very self-conscious, just because I feel like I'm my own worst enemy. I'm afraid that I look goofy out there. But I challenge you guys to do that. Go out and record yourself, because you'd be surprised what little things that you notice. Whether maybe one foot is landing just a little bit on the outside of the foot and you pronate through a little bit more, or maybe the other foot's landing on the outside and you keep that supination, or maybe you're landing on your heel and you're really hitting that loading phase really hard. Kind of watch how you run. So a lot of times when we have injuries, there may be simple tweaks that we can make to our gait that can help fix that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. So